That was, of course, Italian guitar phenom Matteo Mancuso. I've been following him since I saw this video 6 years ago on YouTube. In today's interview, we'll explore the depth of Matteo's skill, his approach to guitar playing, and the creative journey that's made him one of the most talked about guitarists on the scene today. Here's my interview. Matteo, welcome.
Thank you, Rick.
It's such a pleasure to meet you in person. I said this to you earlier, but I've been watching your videos for years.
Yeah.
And those were videos that you made yourself, right?
Yeah. I started in 2014 making the first videos on YouTube, yeah.
Now, the thing that I noticed that I was blown away by is the way that you play with your fingers on your right hand. I want to talk about your technique. I mean, your playing is so unique. And this is just one aspect of why it's unique. And you have a number of different styles of the way you use your right hand. Can you talk about those first?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I started playing like that because I was always seeing my father playing classical guitar back then. I started when I was around 10 years old. At that time, he was playing a lot of classical guitar. So I just thought that every guitar was meant to be played with fingers, you know. I didn't know that you should use a pick for electric and fingers with classical. So I started with that technique because, you know, my first influences were actually electric players. So I actually started with the electric and then studied a little bit of classical guitar later on.
Now, were you playing on your dad's guitars?
Yeah, actually, my first guitar was a Strat. It was like a little Squire Strat guitar, the cheap ones.
Yeah.
But it felt like the best guitar for me because I fell in love with Hendrix music and it was playing a Strat, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, then a lot of the traditional 70s rock bands like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. I fell in love with that kind of music. And I first started playing with this kind of bass technique because it felt more comfortable to me, I started playing basically like that. And the first thing I noticed when I first started was the tone was so much different. Like I was hearing on the records this strong attack and,
Right, the pick attack.
The pick attack, yeah. And, I realized that in order to achieve that kind of sound with fingers, you need to have nails. Yeah. So it's a kind of rule that I discovered through years of practicing, of course, that you need to have nails in order to achieve that kind of tone. Even for electric guitar, I'm saying. The thing is, you don't have to grow, long nails for the electric guitar because the strings are closer to each other if you compare them to, a classical guitar, of course. Yeah. So I think that is way more comfortable to me is to have like very short nails on my right hand, so they get on the string in an easier way, I think. So that was my kind of first rule. So I started to playing, this kind of lines. This kind of 2 note per string pentatonic stuff. I learned it that way. And I honestly didn't know about legato in the first days. So every note was picked. Yeah. So I started to, experiment with this kind of stuff. And I think when I first discovered the first virtuoso players, some of the things I was hearing were not possible with only this technique.
Who are these virtuoso players you're talking about?
The first one was Eddie Van Halen.
Yep.
It was the first one, we all know Eruption, and we all know Eddie. And it was the first one where I honestly thought, okay, I'm never gonna able to do this. Was the first one that I thought, okay, I'm never gonna do this kind of stuff. And then I discovered Eric Johnson, and he's still one of my favorite players. I mean, Eric is a master of the fretboard, he's a master of the guitar. And, I learned a lot of stuff from them. And Eddie, kind of introduced me to the shred kind of playing. Even if I don't consider myself a shredder, but it was that kind of word to me. And then, all the different influences. As I said, I started as a rock and roll guy, but I also have a strong jazz influence. So through the years, I listened to really a lot of players, a lot of different players. So I would say from the technical playing side, Eric Johnson and Eddie Van Halen were the first.
Just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that my channel is self-funded, and if you want to see more interviews like this, think about becoming a member of the Beato Club. That's how I help support bringing in guests and traveling to do remote interviews. Link in the description. Thanks. In Italy, you're from Sicily.
Yeah.
Where do you hear these players? Was this something your dad was listening to, or these things that you just heard from your friends?
Yeah, I think I consider myself pretty lucky because I came from a musical family. Everyone is interested in music in a way. So my father plays the guitar. He's also a guitar player, and he kind of was a listening guide to me, especially the first years. And it was like he kind of introduced me to all the people from the past generations. So I was really passionate about Van Halen, as I said, and he always said to me, you know, but Van Halen didn't invent everything. You know, you should listen to Jimmy Page. You should listen to Wes Montgomery. You should listen to Django, and it was kind of got me back in the past.
Yeah,
it was really useful because I actually discovered that a lot of stuff that we interpret as new sometimes are just like a reinterpretation of something old. And I now have a really strong jazz influence because of that, because I got through the past, I listened to all of these players. I'm a big fan of Django's music. You know, a lot of the guys, even from the 80s, like Pat Metheny, George Benson, Wes Montgomery, of course, is an incredible player. So I always try to mix up these things. And that was because of my father. He was actually my very first listening guide. Rather than a teacher, it was like more, listen to this.
You should check this out.
Yeah.
How did you do the tremolo, Van Halen tremolo interruption with your fingers?
I think it's kind of...
You're using 3 fingers to do this, right? Or 2 fingers?
Yeah, it is actually 3 fingers.
You're doing 3, okay.
And it is always ring, medium, and index.
Yes.
So
in that order, you're saying?
In that order, always. Yeah. And it is called, it's kind of a tremolo. It's similar
It's like the classical guitar tremolo technique.
Yeah. But the position is actually more similar to the bass players.
Yes.
So yeah, it's always on this order. And if you practice that on different string, you can achieve something similar. Yeah, you know, this kind of stuff.
What gauge strings are you using? 10s?
These are 10s.
As your hand moves up on the guitar to the low E string, there's nothing to anchor your hand. How do you play accurately? You were just playing on the low E string. Is your thumb touching the top of the pickup, or is it just free floating?
Yeah, that's when this thing coming up.
Okay, I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, this is basically in order to hold my thumb the way I do.
Yes.
So in order to play effectively, especially in the 6th string, sometimes I even change my anchor point.
Okay.
And, sometimes it's like that, you know?
When you're playing back there, there's more resistance on the string. Does that affect it, or do you go back there because there is more resistance?
It affects the tone, of course. And when the string doesn't move a lot, it's actually easier for me. So I tend to play between the pickups most of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I want to achieve a different tone, I play here or I play here, it depends. But most of my lines, I play on this part of the strings.
How did you move from the bass technique to the other techniques that you use?
Well, that came with time, and it's something I'm still working on, actually. And because I started with that, this technique felt like more natural to me. But when I first started studying classical guitar, there were some lines where I had to do like 1 note per string stuff, like... And you can't really do that with this technique. I mean, you can do it, but it's not quite relaxed as the other technique.
It's kind of like it's difficult, like you would be with a pick. So you're using then you're using the thumb to play to repeat the pattern over.
Yeah, yeah.
It's way more economical to do it like that.
Yeah, and I'm relaxed when I'm doing this. It's not like I'm, and you can play some complex lines with this kind of technique. I think when you have your thumb available, you can have like a wider vocabulary of sounds, let's say, because you can start a pattern with whatever string you want. So you can come up with this kind of arpeggio forms that pick users can't really think sometimes. So
you can never do that fast with the pick.
Unless you're rabbit picking, or maybe you are changing the fingering a little bit, like two notes, or it really depends on the line, actually. But for this kind of arpeggio stuff, it feels much. I feel much freedom, more freedom with all my fingers available.
Yep.
So that's why I try to concentrate, especially when I started studying classical guitar. I concentrated a lot on this kind of lines, because I wanted to have a personal vocabulary also. Mm-hmm. I like a lot Eric Johnson, of course, and Eddie Van Halen, all these guys. But actually, I wanted to, achieve a personal vocabulary. And I was playing all these Eric Johnson lines, Actually, I can pretty much play things that pick users play, but that wasn't the point of the fingerstyle technique, because that already has been done, actually. So there was a point in my life there, especially when I was a teenager, where I studied a lot of the 80s guys, people like Paul Gilbert, Ingrid Malmsteen, of course, John Petrucci also, people that have an incredible alternate picking technique, you know. This kind of phase helped me a lot to achieve the rest stroke technique I have now. But actually, later on in my career, I started to go more in deep with this free stroke technique. So I mainly use these two techniques for my right hand. This is called the rest stroke, and this is called the free stroke.
Now explain to people why it's a rest stroke. This is a classical guitar technique.
Yeah, it's called rest stroke because I basically rest my finger onto the next string. So if I play the first string, I will play something like that.
And rest it on the B string.
And rest it on the B string. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, free stroke I don't do. It's a completely different movement, basically. A lot of bass players start like that because it's a little bit easier to control.
I've also seen you do things where you'll rake across the strings like you would with a pick if you're playing with distortion. Can you demonstrate?
Yeah, that's basically the principles of strumming,
Yeah.
So instead of having like a down picking and up, I have like my thumb for the up and my index for the down, so it's something like that, And this is kind of close to the pick attack sometimes. And but for the sweeping, actually, when it's like one note per string, I actually prefer to not repeat the same finger, Like I don't normally do two notes with my thumb because it will be hard for me. So I always try to find a fingering where I always change finger for each note. So that's why if I have something like it's never like I never do
two thumbs in a row or anything like that.
Yeah. I do it sometimes, but I try to not do it because sometimes it's kind of a muscular memory thing.
Yeah.
But I try to get rid of this.
When you're doing that strumming, like, does it really wear your nails down?
Not really. That's because I'm lucky because I have really strong nails. But actually for the electric guitar, I used a little bit of gel sometimes. I use the gel for only these 3 fingers.
To harden the nail a little bit more,
Just
right?
to harden the nails a little bit more. This is the only natural one that I have, the thumb, because it doesn't get you know.
So if you broke a nail before a show, what do you do?
I guess I will do some tapping stuff.
Okay, yes, so you do tapping. You do tapping
Yeah.
I've seen you do a lot of tapping in your lines. How do you do tapping with the nail on the index finger?
I think it's a matter of, you know, the inclination of your...
Yeah, just getting the right angle.
Yeah, the angle is different. If you don't have nail, the angle is pretty much like that.
Yes.
But in order to get the note clean, I kind of have my... I always use my middle finger for the tapping, first
Okay.
of all. So it's kind of a little bit more in this position. So I still get the note, but it's a little bit...
Is it
with
because there's
this
a little bit
side.
more meat on that finger? It's where the
Yeah.
nail doesn't hit the string then?
And it's because, you know, it's the... I use the medium finger because it's the bigger
It's a longer finger.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
longer one, and it has a little bit more meat here.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that's why I use this angle, actually. So I have this kind of lines. If I, let's say I take, for example, a E minor 7 arpeggio. I just play it with my middle here. I'm using string skipping, so it's
Yes.
5 string, 3rd string, and 1st string.
Yeah. That's amazing, Matteo, because
Yeah,
you have a
thanks.
totally clean sound here, right? And that's
Yeah.
very hard to do and make it sound clean like that.
It's more fun with the distortion, but yeah, thanks.
So you'll do those arpeggios, but you can play the arpeggios just in position without doing the tapping.
Yeah,
That's just kind of
yeah.
another way that you can attack that.
Yeah, actually I can do a lot of examples. I pretty much try to, follow a fingering where I have one note per string, as I said. So if I have like a... I sometimes do this kind of stuff. And if you listen it to, like, with the distortion, yeah, and it's this kind of lines where you can have like, it's always one note per string, and it's easier if I follow the same fingering. And I do this kind of stuff also. And, all kinds of arpeggios. I'm trying to find, unusual arpeggios sometimes. It's not always the minor triad or the major triad. And sometimes I do this kind of stuff. This is a really popular, chord form. And
Yeah.
sometimes I use it for my lead playing. This kind of stuff. So I always try to follow, like if I have a chord shape, an unusual chord shape, let's say, I always try to transfer it to my lead playing.
Yeah,
actually.
make it into single notes.
Yeah, making it into single notes.
You also play a lot of these fourth things. We've been talking about this already today. These are things that like Frank Gambale does so easily with
Wow,
sweep
yeah.
picking, but he does them with bars, and they're very hard to do unless you have a certain types of fingers, right? So how do you use your technique to do these kind of ideas?
Yeah, I try to incorporate, first of all, a little bit of legato in it, because I like to have like a balance between the pick notes and the legato notes.
Yep.
So whenever I feel like I have to play like some quartal kind of stuff where
Yep.
you have to bar things, this is like, let's take for example this line. So whenever I have this kind of lines, first of all, I try to follow the, as I said, the right fingering for the right hand. So I never repeat the finger, but I always try to have a lot of attention to the left hand also. So economy of motion is really important here. I never try to do
You
this
never
kind
do
of
bars.
stuff.
I noticed that. You like the finger. It's not that you never do bars. You do bars with your index finger, but
Yeah, I
but when
mostly
those-
bar with my index because it feels easier for me.
Yeah.
If I have to bar with my ring or medium, I can't really do that without in a very clean
Yeah.
way, let's say. So
Yeah.
I always try instead of doing this. So that's why I try to, came up with different fingerings, and you can pretty much, you can even play lines where, in order to change direction with your pick, you need to sometimes do two notes on the same string,
Yes.
and then you can change direction.
Yeah.
But it's not the case with finger. You can actually change direction whenever you want and start with a new string. So you can pretty much like string skipping between the sixth and the first string with ease, because the finger is already there. So you can play lines like and with distortion it sounds more fun, and thanks, man.
Love that.
And this is basically a string skipping quartal pattern, let's
Yes,
say.
yeah.
And the thing I like about, quartal stuff is that I don't have the major third here or the minor third.
Yeah.
So you can pretty much play this line on A minor 7
Sure.
or A dominant 7, and it will still work.
Yeah.
So that's why I studied a lot of, this quartal stuff.
You have that band around the strings to keep the open strings from ringing. Now I notice that when you go down and play lower, you just push it back with your hand.
Yeah.
Is that just something you've incorporated in your technique?
Yeah, it is part of my muscular memory. Yeah, so
Right.
sometimes I use it, especially for the tapping stuff,
Yeah.
because I don't have my palm available.
Yeah.
So I try to use it, especially for distortion, because if I play in clean, it's not really the case. So it is pretty silent even without this. But actually, when I have to play on distortion and I have this position here, and you can hear that there is a little bit of string noise.
I do, yeah.
So when I play with this one, especially when I'm playing with this technique, I try to have it always.
Well, there you did. You went back. You were playing the note at the second fret, and you just kind of
Yeah,
you
I
just
did.
push it back.
I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's part of the muscular memory
Yeah.
thing now, because I always use it.
But it
yeah.
sounds so loosely that if you go back in that position, your hand just kind of pushes it out of the way.
Yeah. Sometimes it's with this part of the hand basically, so I push it towards there.
Tell me about people that whose phrasing you really like. To some people, they hear the more of a Larry Carlton influence. Did you ever listen to much of Larry's playing at all?
Yeah. I listen to Larry a lot. Actually, one of the first ones that was more into the jazz background was Robin Ford.
Robin Ford,
because
yeah.
I was really into blues when I was a teenager, and I listened to a lot of licks by him, and I was really fascinated by how it still sounds jazzy, but it has like a really strong blues background.
Yes.
And another one of these is Scott Anderson,
Yep.
for example. So I was studying lines like in, and I was always like trying to analyze the out notes, because I knew that, okay, this is the pentatonic scale. But I wanted to analyze why that note was sounding really good. And, I came to know these things thanks to Robin Ford, because I was analyzing some of his lines, and he's so good at phrasing and all this kind of stuff. And Larry Carlton is one of the guys that introduced me to the bebop vocabulary. So I was always listening stuff like and Larry Carlton was playing a lot of this kind of jazzy bebop lines. And of course, when I first started learning this stuff, I kind of got back in time first and see, okay, where is the source material? And the source material was Charlie Parker, actually. And a lot of the jazz guys transcribed a lot of the Charlie's licks. And I tried to do that in a way in order to incorporate that on my also rock phrasing, because I really like guys that can rock a lot, but they have also the vocabulary and the jazz. People like Scott Anderson, Frank Gambale also, and this kind of guys. They were Mike Stern also.
Yeah,
they were like my kind of guitar heroes at the time, and I wanted to sound like them in a way. So that's how I started to incorporate some of my jazz phrasing on my vocabulary.
What about guitarists like Joe Pass, another Italian guitarist?
Yeah, Joe was a big influence of me because I first started listening to Joe thanks to Virtuoso, his solo album, and I think it's one of the guitar masterpieces out there. And but also his single note lines were so good.
So good.
Not only the chord melody stuff and the solo stuff, and that's why I transcribed some stuff from him, and I started incorporating some of my chromaticism thanks to Joe. So all this kind of stuff. I basically incorporate them thanks to Joe Pass, and another master of this kind of style is Pat Martino.
Yes.
So yeah, and this kind of lines, and I stole some of them from Pat.
It's interesting because Joe was a pick player on Virtuoso, and then at the end, later on, he became all fingers. Yeah,
that was really interesting because for a lot of his chord melody stuff, actually fingers, of course, helped a lot.
Yep,
he was a crazy pick player back then.
Talk about your chord vocabulary and how you incorporate chords within your single note playing.
I always try to, first of all, visualizing the same chord in different ways. And of course, you can have the inversions that helps you. But actually, I think that I always think about, especially when I'm improvising, I like to improvise by thinking about all the different chords available on the key. So if I'm playing on D minor 7, of course I can think also about A minor or C major and all the triads available on the key, basically. So whenever I have a line, like let's take for example A minor 7. I have my safe zone, that it's the pentatonic box. And if I have to, sound a little bit more out of the pentatonic box, right now I just thought about C major 7. And if you start from the root, actually you can get A minor 9, basically. So that's how I started to, expand a little bit more my vocabulary by visualizing all the chords available. And another thing, of course, it's listening a lot. And whenever I have, this kind of lines, some of these, of course, patterns are a little bit out of the, Dorian pentatonic stuff. And what I try to do when I want to go like a little bit out of the key is to think about maybe a 5-1. And on this line here, I thought basically E dominant 7 and back to E.
Back to A minor.
Back to E minor.
Yep.
So I did this little line.
E7, and so we hear hear that chord movement there.
Yeah, it's a little bit of chord movement, and that's basically how I view outside playing also. It's not like thinking about the pentatonic box an half step away.
Yeah.
It's more thinking about another chord it's like thinking about a chord progression that the rhythm section is not playing,
Right.
basically. So I think that I really like is the basic example is the 5/1 movement. Yeah, and you can expand your lines with this kind of mindset.
What's something difficult for you to play? Is there a solo that you learned that's really difficult to play?
One of the most difficult ones to learn and to memorize was the Giant Steps solo from Bob Minzer.
Yeah.
I think I transcribed it at the start of the previous year, start of 2023.
Yeah.
I remember.
Can you play any of it right now?
No, I don't even remember it. It was something, okay, I transcribed it, I know it, and then the next week, like boom, I did the video, and then the next week, okay, oh, I can't play it anymore because it was so hard that if you don't play it like every day,
Yeah.
you forget some of the lines because there are some lines that, of course, they are non-guitaristic.
A lot of sax lines are just don't fall under the fingers. Michael Brecker solos, for example, are very weird to play on the guitar.
Yeah, yeah. And
When
there
I
are some crazy lines. I remember some of the things that I transcribed from Michael. There were some, symmetrical things that with guitar sometimes are hard to visualize.
Yeah.
This kind of...
Would you say that you're more of a rock player, a jazz player, a fusion of both? What would you say?
Well, I like the fact that my music can't be really labeled as rock, jazz, and just as my playing. So I don't want to think about myself like a rock player or a jazz player, because as I said, I started like a rock player, but later on there were so many things that I liked that the name rock wasn't enough, to contain all these kind of influences. So I like the fact that the things I play, the lines and the music I play in general cannot be labeled as easily, so I can't describe myself, basically.
When I first saw you playing in a trio.
Yeah.
Who were the people that you played with back then?
Yeah, they were the first trio project that I had was called Snips, and it was basically a cover project. We were playing a lot of jazz standard stuff, popular jazz standards like The Chicken, Spain, this kind of stuff. But we were arranging them in a way like, let's play The Chicken like 100 BPM faster and let's see what happens,
Right.
And that was one of the first videos that blew up on the internet. I think it was in 2017.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from that, I started to, doing more trio videos, because I saw that people were more interested when I was playing with other people rather than just with backing tracks, So I started to move towards that way, and in 2020 I started to compose my own stuff, actually, and it was the start of my second trio project. It was called the Matteo Mancuso Trio. A pretty banal name. Yeah. And that was a different mindset because I was done with covers, and I wanted to do something more unique, and I started to compose something with these guys. And by the way, they are called Giuseppe Bruno on the drums and Stefano India on the bass.
Okay.
I started with them in 2020, and I did a lot of work with them. We did have a lot of fun. I like, when I'm composing, I really like the process of being together and see what happens, and that's the beauty of playing with other people. And actually was the thing that I didn't like about the classical world, That's why I don't consider myself a classical player, because with classical guitar you play with too much time just alone with your score. And it wasn't fun to me. I really liked the interaction, especially with the rhythm section. I really like to talk with the drummer, in a way, talk with the bass player and interacting with each other, and improvisation and all of that. I was always fascinated by this world. That's why I chose this instrument over the classical guitar, yeah.
Do you Or did you learn anything from watching YouTube videos back
Yeah.
10 years ago or anything like that?
Yeah. I transcribed a lot of stuff mainly from YouTube videos,
Right.
basically. I came to know a lot of players through YouTube, you know. Guthrie is the perfect example.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of players, maybe more underground players, but, YouTube, you can basically see everything. And, also a lot of YouTubers that I like, that I watch a lot of videos, and you, of course, are the perfect example. And Adam Neely is one of the dudes. I really like him a lot. And I'm pretty much a millennial, so YouTube is a big part of me. Yeah.
Could we get you to play something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Wow, amazing.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
tell me about that song, Matteo.
Well, it's called Falcon Flight. It's actually one of my favorite songs from the album because I wasn't really able to label them, It's not rock, it's not jazz, so it was something new to me. And I really like this song because he has I think he has the right combination of a simple element and a complex one. And the simple element is the melody. It's basically everything is in E flat. All the notes of the melody are. But the chords are a little bit different. They're not really related to each other. And I have this philosophy that if you don't know what to do with your chord progression, a sus chord will always help you. So.
Right.
It's a really interesting chord, yeah. So I wanted to write something that had like a, complex chord progression, or at least interesting chord progression, let's say, but with a simple melody on top. So that's how Falcon Flight came out.
When you're playing over these tunes, what do you think about? Are you just you just play?
Before I was thinking about don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up all the time. But usually, when I'm playing with my trio, I just to, try to live the moment a bit. Where you're having fun on the stage, people understand that and they kind of feel it. So I always try to have fun when I'm playing, and I have this philosophy, especially when I'm playing through the changes and maybe on complex things, that thought is the enemy of flow. Mm-hmm. And I heard it from an exceptional drummer called Vinny Colaiuta, and from an exceptional YouTube channel called Rick Beaton. Yeah, I think it was your interview, right?
Yes, I remember Vinny said that, and I couldn't believe that he just came up with that. Coming up with a drum intro or a signature that actually is worthy of being out in front of a song by itself is even more difficult, I would say, than with a guitar part or a piano part. But when you come up with a great one, like the ones you'll hear in this video today, they usually tend to become really big songs. In today's video, I'm going to count down my top 20 greatest drum intros of all time. When I did the acoustic guitar intro video, a lot of people asked me what I was recording through, and I was answering in the comments, what microphone and mic pre. So I want to talk about real quick what I'm using to record the drums. It's a very simple setup. The microphones we're using for this session are a stereo pair of AKG 414 BULS from the mid-80s. And then for our mono mic, I have a Royer R122V. It's a tube mic. It's a really great sounding mic, and it'll sound great when I want to bring the drums to mono. The mic pre's for the AKG mics are BAE 1073s, and the mic pre I'm using for the Royer is a BAE 1066. I'm also using a stereo compressor on the room mics. It's a Tagler audio compressor called the Creme. Since these drum intros span many different genres of music, I thought I better bring in a pro drummer, so I brought in my friend Jack Jones to play drums. And I'm going to accompany Jack on the guitar and bass and keyboards when necessary to give you context as to how these intros work with the beginning of the song. Here we go. Coming in at number 20 is a song that was released in 1990. It's from the grunge era, but it's not a grunge band, and it's one of my favorite drummers of that era. Song number 19 was produced by Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno. It has an instantly recognizable intro and is from one of the biggest records of the 1980s. Song number 18 was released in 1979. It was the band's debut single, and it was a 6-week number one. Coming in at number 17 is the drum intro from a record that was released in 1971 and is one of the biggest rock albums of all time. The introduction also shares a very similar groove to the Little Richard song Keep a Knockin'. Check it out. Song number 16 was an intro that all the drummers when I was growing up learned to play. It came out in 1976. Here it is. Song number 15 was released in 1973 when people used to use cowbells. Check it out. Song number 14 is by a drummer that's been in 2 huge bands. There's actually a few different drum intros that I could have taken of his, but I really like this one, even though it wasn't as popular of a song as the other one I was going to take. Coming in at number 13 is a song where the drummer and singer are the same person. In fact, it takes two of us to play the intro. Song number 12 is from one of the biggest bands of the late 70s and 80s. This happens to be the shortest intro on the list, but as soon as you hear it, you know what song it is.